Welcome back, everyone. We're just finishing up our discussion of chapter 4. We've been discussing a lot of different types of cells in this chapter. We talked about plant cells and animal cells and fungal cells. That's really kind of what we focused on. We also talked about bacterial cells. We talked about archaea, which you may or may not have heard about. But something we haven't talked about are viruses. And the reason we haven't talked about viruses in this chapter is because viruses are not made of cells. Viruses, viroids, and prions. You may or may not have heard of viroids and prions before. These are things that can invade cells, they can replicate, they can cause disease, but they are not made of cells. They're acellular and they are parasites. Because they are not made of cells, they do not have their own ribosomes. They do not have their own enzymes. They do not have their own ability to make ATP. So they are incapable of living on their own. They cannot live in a free living existence. They are dependent on other cells. So they are parasites. When they get into your cells, they do not get into your cells to make you feel better. They get into your cells and mess with the cells. It's kind of hijack and make you feel not so great. So viruses do not have a cytoplasm. They don't have organelles. They don't have ribosomes. A virus is really just some sort of DNA or RNA, some sort of nucleic acid. Whereas in cells, we have DNA and RNA. In a virus, you have DNA or RNA. You typically only have one type of nucleic acid. And then some sort of protein coat around it. That by itself, nucleic acid, protein coat, that's enough to make a functional virus. Although often they'll also have an envelope around it, which is a phospholipid layer, often derived from the cell it just hijacked. They can invade and infect cells, and then since they don't have all of these structures of their own, they use a host synthetic machinery to produce more viruses. So viruses do have some features of life. They are capable of going through evolution. They do have DNA or RNA, so they do have genetic information. They do use the same genetic code, but they don't quite have all the features of life because they're not capable of reproducing on their own, right? They are dependent on something else to reproduce for them. So there is some debate, still a little bit of debate about are viruses alive or not. And I feel like I probably shouldn't give you the answer to that. I feel like it may be obvious where I stand from this discussion. But viruses are very small. The smallest viruses are only about the size of a ribosome. The largest viruses are about a quarter of the size of a bacterial cell. Here are some different types of viruses. Some that contain RNA will be poliovirus, which is the virus that causes polio. Tobacco mosaic virus. This is a virus that infects plants like tobacco. It may infect some similar plants like tomatoes, but it cannot infect people. Human immunodeficiency virus. This is HIV, which causes the disease AIDS. Some DNA-containing viruses, which include papillomavirus. This can cause warts, like on your skin, or also genital warts. Herpes simplex, which can cause herpes, both oral, like cold sores, and genital herpes. And a bacteriophage. This is a virus that infects bacteria. This is a virus that cannot infect people. So this one, you probably have lots of these right now in your gut infecting bacteria in your gut, but they don't infect you. These different viruses, you can see they have different shapes. These kind of look like, this alien rover landing thing. These kind of look more like a soccer ball. These look like little pins. So they have different shapes, and their shapes are defined by their protein capsid. And that chemically simple virus just has a coat or a capsid surrounding DNA or RNA. Some viral capsids have one type of protein. More complex viruses could have capsids with a number of different proteins. Or here, this bacteriophage, it has this little capsid area, has a little sheath area, it has these little pins, tail fibers. It has lots of different proteins here. Some viruses are surrounded by a membrane. These would be enveloped virus, for example, HIV. So are viruses living or not? Living things have some fundamental properties. Metabolism, they're able to do cellular reactions. They're able to respond to stimuli. They're able to perceive stimuli. They're able to reproduce. Viruses don't really satisfy these things. They don't really have metabolism. They don't really respond to stimuli. They can evolve. That is one life property they do have. But these other living properties aren't really possessed by viruses. They really are only able to exist using the machinery of another cell. Okay, related to viruses are something called viroids. Viroids are just a piece of RNA. That's it. Small circular little RNA. They are the smallest known infectious agents. They can cause diseases in plants. I don't think we know of any viroid diseases that infect anything other than plants. If you know of one, feel free to let me know. Some of these diseases caused by viroids include coconut kadang, isn't that a fun name? Potato spindle tuber disease, which actually will cause your potato I think it's potato tuber spindle tuber. It'll cause your potato tubers to get really spindly instead of having, nice big potatoes. Chrysanthemum stunt viroid, avocado sunblotch viroid. So a lot of crop plants can be affected by these viroids. Viroids also don't exist freely, and they can be transmitted when the surfaces of adjacent plant cells are damaged. They can transfer from one cell to the next. Sometimes they can transfer from bad pruning or from wind breakage or from insects damaging your crops. Prions are proteinaceous infective particles. That's what P-R-I-N, that word prion came from. Proteinaceous infective particles. So these are proteins that can cause disease. They can infect, but they are only a protein. They don't have any DNA or RNA or anything with it. These are proteins that are misfolded, and when they get into your cells, they can interact with the proteins in your cells to cause your proteins to be misfolded. And if your proteins are not folded correctly, they're not functioning correctly. Prions are responsible for some different neurological diseases, scrapie, kuru, and mad cow disease. You may have heard of some of these. Scrapie is a disease that can affect sheep and goats, and it's named scrapie because it causes them to kind of rub up against trees and other objects. They kind of scrape themselves and scrape their wool. Kuru is a progressive degenerative disease of the central nervous system. Kuru, I think of cannibalism because that's the main way that is transferred between people. I think of TV shows where they try to be edgy or creepy or something. That's when you kind of see Kuru. Mad cow disease, you may have heard of mad cow disease. This is a disease that affects cattle. These are all neurological diseases. They can cause problems in the brain and cause deterioration of the brain. Mad cow disease, if a person were to eat that cattle, it could also allow that prion to be ingested and transferred to the human and cause a prion disease in a human. Prions are abnormally folded versions of normal proteins, and because they are misfolded, they can't be destroyed by cooking or boiling. What would that do? Destroy the shape more? So you can't destroy it. You just have to, if you have a cow with mad cow, that cow has to be culled from the herd. Do not let that meat go into feed for the animals. Do not let that feed go into burgers. You just cannot let that animal be eaten. And in regions where the prion disease, chronic wasting disease, is found in deer and elk, that has been a problem here in Tennessee a few years ago. If you're in an area where that is a problem, hunters should have their meat tested for the prion before eating it. Don't just assume that anything you hunt is good to eat. Okay, so that finishes up our discussion of chapter 4. We have talked about how cells came to exist. We have talked about differences between our 3 domains. We've talked about prokaryotes and eukaryotes. We talked about our organelles in our eukaryotes, all the structures that we find in a eukaryotic cell internally and externally. And then we finished up talking about these weird things that aren't cells at all. I hope to see you soon. If you have any questions, let me know. Bye.